you have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. Before we jump into the show this week, Truelytics has a big announcement. TrueMatch, the online matchmaking solution designed specifically to facilitate your desire to find the right partner for a merger, acquisition, or succession planning, is officially live and ready to rock. If you are a Truelytics user, make sure you swing by, log in, and check it out. If you are not yet a Truelytics user, what are you waiting for? Even if you have no immediate plans to sell or buy another financial advisory business, you should make sure you join TrueMatch so you can have the visibility into the market that you need, right? It's always good to understand how much is your business worth and how does it compare to other businesses in the marketplace, because you never know. Someday you may want to acquire another business, or you may want to sell your business, or you may need a new succession partner. So really, really good stuff. Simply go to truelytics.com/TrueMatch and click the schedule demo button. Okay, on the show today is Max Winthrop, the CEO of Winthrop Wealth Management based in Boston, Massachusetts. I am thrilled to share this episode with you because I think Max and the rest of the team at Winthrop Wealth Management epitomize everything we have been encouraging firms to do at Truelytics with not only the product, but also the content we produce, like this podcast. This is a fantastic story of business transition and transformation, because not only did Max and his brother take on leadership roles in a firm their dad and their uncle started decades ago, but working together, they modernized the business with new technology solutions, role realignments within the team, and a new approach to running a modern financial advisory business. Make sure you have a notepad or your notes app open for this one because it's really, really good stuff. Okay, are you ready? Let's get to it with Max Winthrop. Max, buddy, so great to have you on the show. I've been really looking forward to having you on the show for quite some time. We had a fantastic prep call. So welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
You know, what? Two things to kick this off so people can kind of get an appreciation for it. Number one, you are like in my old stomping grounds, right downtown Boston, where I got my career started. I used to work for a Pioneer Group Mutual Funds, which is right at 60 State Street. So I know exactly the area of the city you're in and kind of the neighborhood you're walking in. So, hit some of the local food joints for me. I'll give you my list of favorite lunch places.
Absolutely will do. It's a little bit different now that we're dealing with a pandemic. I've never seen State Street. So we're right on State Street on the main financial drag.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of high-rise buildings around us that are completely empty. So
it's amazing.
A little sad, a little bit scary, but it seems like people are still able to work remotely, which is great. We're actually about 90% remote at this point.
Yeah. Wow. And look, I mean, a lot of us were working remote. I mean, I'm permanently remote, but like a lot of people have been working remote, at least partially, for years. So the good thing is, especially in our space, the good thing is there is a reasonable amount of comfort with it, right? It wasn't something that was 100% new. I think being remote and having the whole family home was new for a lot of people. That really kind of threw them a curveball. The other thing I wanted, you and I were just going through some technical issues, kind of getting things up and running. And what was neat for me during that experience, that I started thinking of it as you were tinkering around with all your tech, trying to get things. And by the way, your hero, you like went through all the motions to try to make this work. You are a tinkerer. Like in our prep call, when we were talking about the business, and we're going to get into this about how, you came into the business, you took it over and you've grown it and you've kind of rapidly transitioned the business and modernized it. A lot of that was due to tinkering, right? To getting in there and having that experimental roll.
Lots of tinkering.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this. You proved the point live for me while we're doing this. It's really kind of neat. Well, why don't we start things off with a little bit of a history of Winthrop Wealth Management for those folks who don't know, because Terry Mullen connected the two of us and he said, you guys really should chat because Max has a really interesting story there with Winthrop in terms of like coming in, being the second generation leadership, and really transforming the company from what you think of as a traditional wealth management shop to what it is today. It's much more tech focused and so forth. So maybe you can give everybody a little bit of background about the company.
Sure. So father and uncle started as advisors in the early 80s. So they've been at it. When you look at our years of experience, and I know some firms report, we have 200 years of collective experience. I don't like that measure.
Yeah.
I think it inflates things. It misconstrues. It's abstruse. It's difficult to understand. But they have both 35 years plus of individual experience as advisors. So they originally started as CPAs.
Okay.
One with my father with one of the, at the time, big 8 firms. Now there are 4. They have consolidated, another industry that's consolidated. And my uncle started with the Internal Revenue Service, investigating tax shelters and schemes that we really saw sort of late 80s into the 90s. There were a lot of tax credit deals, so they worked on a lot of that stuff. And what they started to see is that the accountants were shown these investment deals. A lot of these deals ended up blowing up, but the numbers worked out, right? So the accountants were really focused on evaluating the numbers. Does that make sense? But they weren't necessarily in a position to understand the underlying fundamentals of where the money was going, what it was getting invested in. And so they saw enough of this and they said, well, we'd like to learn that business and make sure that going forward, clients have the ability to earn money over time, to grow and preserve and grow their net worth, and not have an event where they lose their principal. So number one in our business is sort of a foundation of risk that came from that. Their experience in that world, being CPAs, made them come into this business with a mindset where capital preservation was so important. And they also started out of the gate in the early 80s with an advisory practice. They operated independently. They had some shared resources, but this was a time where most advisors were operating in a brokerage capacity. It was commission-based. There are lots of movies made around, these huge commission deals, selling stocks that weren't actually real companies. And so they started in an advisory capacity, which means that they charged a fee based on the assets that they managed. And one thing that I think is important to understand there is without assets, you don't get paid. So it takes quite a bit of ramp time to get to a point of critical mass where you can actually make a real living from being an advisory, from having advisory business.
It's really interesting. I love the fact that a foundation of the company is kind of one of those tried and true things, like first, don't lose money, right? So it's like protect the client's assets, right? And it kind of, goes to in that no-duh category of things, like don't lose the client's money. But it's one of those things where if you can show a client, hey, listen, we minimize those valleys for you, right? The markets are going to go up and down. Not every investment is going to be a winner. However, we're going to strive to not lose your money. It creates a sense of trust, right? You also attract a certain type of clientele, I imagine, that is values that, right? That they're not necessarily looking to swing for the fences with every deal and so forth. And so you get a more stable clientele, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good point you make, Mike. What we do has evolved over time, but the foundational principles are still the same. And I don't see them really ever changing. And many of our clients have been with us for a really long time. So we set up the Registered Investment Advisor in 2017, so it's relatively new. And I can talk about that if you'd like. That's sort of the evolution we've made in the last few years, because they were practicing father and uncle separately. They had their own books of business. I alluded to having some shared resources, but that was about it. And what we saw in the industry is there were some forces of change at play. And the investment management, asset management, wealth management world hadn't really been disrupted. And now, if you look at what's happening, it's being disrupted in a really large way. And so when I came in, my brother started about a year before I did. I was working another job for Sun Life of Canada, worked on the investment side doing private placements, but eventually knew I wanted to get into the family business. We saw an opportunity to consolidate and create scale, to bring my father and my uncle together under a partnership structure, create the registered investment advisor, and take that next step towards independence. So that's the evolution that we've gone through. But again, those foundational principles are the same. We did some rebranding recently, and really our tagline is "with you for life," and that's based on trust at the most fundamental level. So we seek to be with our clients on their journey through life, the different stages of life, financially, yes, but also all the other intricate aspects of what you deal with as you go through these life stages.
Yeah, I think you hit that the trust thing really hard, and I imagine the trust thing is important within the company as well, because you mentioned you always knew at some point in time you'd like to join the family business, but you also mentioned like when you came into the business, it was kind of like two separate businesses in some respect, and you had to have the vision to see where you wanted to go with the business, and that there'd be more power of creating the RIA and developing things. But you also had to earn the trust of your father and your uncle, and kind of, how did that go? I'm fascinated by this. This actually is an area where I kind of geek out on, because second generation businesses, it's not always as easy as people think it is. I think sometimes people look at the second generation and they go, oh, this guy had a silver spoon, right? Mom or dad or whoever built the business, and here they come and they've got an easy ramp up. But it didn't. You came in with vision, and you've actually transformed this business, right? Or you led the transformation of this business. How did you gain the trust of your uncle and your dad, and get them to like believe in you that you could do this?
That's a great question. Not an easy path.
Yeah,
absolutely not. And I knew from the outset that it wouldn't be an easy path. But any path that's really easy, I don't think is worth it.
Yeah.
So what I didn't know was some of the challenges that we'd run into along the way. I had an idea that we'd run into challenges, but you never know exactly what they're going to look like. And that's where that tinkering really comes into play. That being said, I think the most challenging thing out of the gate was pursuing setting up the registered investment advisor, because that's a complete change in business structure. So they had existing books of business that we needed to combine. The clients needed to sign completely new paperwork. There was a lot of legal work that needed to be done, the formation of the entities, and then moving the assets over to the new registered investment advisor. So there's all of this underlying work that was incredibly important, and we needed to make sure that we ran a really smooth and seamless transition from the client standpoint. We had to communicate with the clients, what's the story here? Why am I signing over to a new RIA? What's happening? So the messaging was really important, but getting my dad and uncle on board, and I worked with my brother really closely to make sure that we could affect this in the best way possible. To really get my dad and uncle to understand that they thought risk was up here. Maybe we risk losing clients. Maybe we risk, a change that we didn't anticipate, and it's going to be difficult to recover from that. We have to take on a lot of things that we didn't have to before. Compliance and supervision, we own that now. Trade order management, like we're starting to inherit these responsibilities that we didn't necessarily have before. We could rely on the RIA at the time. We could lean on them for a lot of this. So the way we really convinced them was, let's do it one step at a time, and let's begin setting up this structure. Let's begin communicating with our clients about what our intentions are. So we had lead time. And if at any point in time we felt like the risk was unmanageable, then we could cut our losses, and whatever we had done would be a sunk cost. So we took these steps, one step at a time. We met with our RIA at the time, our custodian. We met with service providers to really line up and create a roadmap of implementation and what it would look like. And then we began to explore what resources were required. And that's when we ended up hiring a number of folks to help support the transition.
When you told me this in our prep call, I was really, really impressed with that was the first thing that came when I said, how did you do all this? And you're like, well, it was progressive. It was a one step at a time approach versus, hey, we're just going to come in and flip this thing and, you know, transform it. And, you know, you said from a psychological perspective too, it was easier for people to internally, like, you know, the clients, you know, are one thing, but like internally to get, oh, okay, we'll do this RIA thing. We'll switch there. Okay. Oh, we'll do this next thing. And versus it's like, we're going to radically just shake everything up. I like that you said there that you started with communicating with the clients early before you even made the decision. It sounds like that was really important. And I think I could appreciate that. If my relationship with my financial institution was about to change somewhat dramatically, I mean, probably from a service level to me, not going to change too much, but it's going to be a big change, right? Paperwork might look different. The statement might look a little different, whatever. I would appreciate letting me know it's coming versus just one day going, hey, by the way, I got a whole bunch of documents for you to sign. Bang. You know, life working with Winthrop is different.
Right. Yeah. And they are the biggest stakeholder at the end of the day. And a big piece of this change was made to benefit the clients, to create business continuity, which it existed, but in short form before. And now we have a robust team and continuity plan in place. And that's huge. So there were a lot of positives that we could communicate around the story of creating the RIA and moving the client advisory business to the new RIA. And so at the end of the day, we had a really successful transition. And this is where Lucas and I sort of stepped into the executive roles, because we had these ideas, we had these visions of creating more independence than we had. And this is a really interesting thing to contemplate. So, and for some advisors, this works really well. So by no means am I discounting the value of being under a corporate RIA. So the LPL Financials of the world, Raymond James, Commonwealth Financial, they have a corporate RIA structure with thousands of advisors that can leverage their services. So for us, we were sort of a misfit because we were a lot larger than the average firm. And so our vision was really to internalize everything, create our own entity, and be able to create a structure that was flexible and scalable at the same time, having resources in-house that we didn't before. So our high net worth consulting team, which is composed of, you know, the head of our financial planning, the head of our advanced planning, portfolio management, that all lives in-house now. And that was sort of our grand vision, to create this departmental structure, albeit we're still a small company. Now we have 22 people either employed or affiliated with us. So that's still small, but we've created structure around roles and responsibilities, and we've hired in experts to those roles. And by doing that, we can now leverage this expertise, this sort of pod structure, and consult on client cases in a way that we could never do before. If you look at the typical advisor, and this is something that's really interesting to me, because the typical RIA is actually quite small. And the lead advisor is generally the CEO, the chief investment officer, the chief compliance officer, and wears many different hats. So what happens is you get to a certain asset level, or client level, I should say, and you're capped out on growth. You're done because you don't have the capacity anymore. there are too many things that you have to be responsible for on a daily basis. And for most advisors, what we find, I've had conversations with hundreds of advisors, is they got into the business because they really love working with clients. And once you start distracting them with, oh, you have to do this compliance stuff. Oh, you have to do all this trading stuff. Oh, you have to do all this reporting that isn't related to the client, but you need to do from a business standpoint. They went from spending 90% of the time with the clients, maybe in the mid 80s, early 90s, to now 50 or 60% of their time is spent with the clients. So they want that time back. And that's something that we saw with my father and my uncle, is they were becoming more and more burdened with running the business. And so professional management made a heck of a lot of sense. Hiring it was expensive. So that's where my brother and I stepped in. We said, we can do this. Let's pursue this new structure. It's going to be cost effective because you're not going to have to pay us executive salaries out of the gate. And we're going to earn our weight in what we put into this and what we create. And that's what we've done. It's taken time. It's been difficult, a lot of difficult conversations, but when you look back, if we had presented everything that we've done in the last, call it 4 years, in that initial meeting of here's all the things that we want to change and that we want to do, I guarantee it would have been a hard no.
Yeah. Well, because it's overwhelming, right? It's you think about, like, if I tell you anything in life, by the way, if I tell you you've got to do it, like, I want you to start at zero, or where you're at now, and I want you to this vision of what you're going to look like 3 years from now. It's just like, oh my God, all that change, right? It's brutal, but it, one step at a time. That's why, when you have a baby, it's a baby, and it's gradual. It doesn't do much other than eat and sleep and poop, right? And then it gradually, over time, adds complexity to your life. The same thing with a business.
Yeah. So if I said to you, Mike, okay, you guys got something great going on right now. You don't really need to make change, but why don't we go in, set up a new entity, set up a new partnership structure, move all the clients to this new entity, ask them to sign all these agreements, add $500,000 run rate to technology spend and build an infrastructure, triple the size of our team and increase labor costs like you've never seen before. What are you going to say, right?
Yeah. Like, why?
Well,
like, life's good right now.
Insane.
Yeah.
That sounds insane. But we started with, if we want to act in the best interests of our clients, give you more time back as advisors to be able to focus on client relationships, because they were essentially capped out on growth too.
Yeah.
Couldn't really handle taking on more client relationships because they were increasing service levels. And that's one thing that I'll give them so much credit for, is the way that they interact, engage with, and service their client relationships is unique. They have really tight and intimate bonds with their clients. And so that's why we have the continuity that we do, right? But you can't all of a sudden take on another 10 clients and give them that same level of service without making change. So the change that we made has created capacity for them, and they work every single day still working with the clients that they want to work with. And we're able to grow the business, bring on new relationships, because they don't have to worry about what's happening from a business standpoint and the day-to-day that is involved in running the company.
It's really interesting. Implicit in what you're talking about there is, we talk a lot about on this show about, instead of running a practice, you run a business, is what we want people to do, right? Because a lot of advisors, especially at a solo level, and you alluded to it, right? They're the chief cook and bottle washer, as the saying goes. They do everything. And they're capped out because it's basically like a job you own, and there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many things you can do. And it's also very difficult to be good at all the things, right? So some people are really good with client relationships. They may not be as good as being a portfolio manager. They may not be as good as some of the clerical stuff that you need to do in a business, right? But what you hit on was two crucial areas that I think are really important, especially as we're moving into the next generation of advisory firm owners, right? The first generation being your uncle and your dad's age, is that continuity is really necessary. And so you need to put something in place to make sure that, the business is solid, that clients are continuing to take care of in the event that something happens to the advisors, but also in the event that the advisors decide they want to retire too. And then you also mentioned scale. And I think that's so, so important, right? You hit a wall. We all do. Like, there's only so many hours in a day. And if managing a new client means I've got to add another 5 hours to the week or whatever it is, how much more money is it really? I'm good, right?
Yeah, I'm 50, 55, 60, 65. And is it really worth it for me to do that, right?
Yeah.
You brought up a few really great points. And one thing that we found, so we just transitioned successfully, and I would say seamlessly, but you can ask the firm if you want. Yeah. Our first true affiliate partner.
Okay.
About 150 million in assets, some really great client relationships, very talented planner at the helm that didn't necessarily have that capacity that he wanted.
Yeah.
And so that was the driver, right? He had gotten to the point that he's very successful no matter what, but had aspirations to do more and to offer a broader array of services to the clients. And what that really took was narrowing the focus. And something that you said resonated with me, which is chief cook and bottle washer, is if you're cooking and you're a great cook and you're also washing the dishes at the same time so that you can serve the next customer, how deep can you really go in your culinary art and become the best chef you possibly can? Let's say that's your natural talent and that's what you want to be doing. We're then limited by the other things that we have to do. So we believe here at Winthrop Wealth in specialization. So and I'll just reference this because I think it's interesting, and do with it what you will. When we hired into these sort of centers of expertise that I was discussing earlier, so financial planning, our head of financial planning doesn't have responsibility for any clients. Our head of advanced planning doesn't have responsibility for any clients. Our head of portfolio management, or co-CIO, doesn't have responsibility for any clients. Now, that's very non-traditional, especially at our size.
Yeah.
And in our industry in general. Usually it's, hey, how much production do you have? If you have enough production, come join the team. We want to subsidize things and we need production for that. So go out and recruit clients or bring in clients from a pre-existing relationship, whatever it may be. We don't require them to go out and bring in relationships. We don't even require them to manage relationships. What we do is we've set up this infrastructure so that it can be leveraged in a consultative way. We're highly collaborative. So Mike, let's say that you're a new client and you're coming on board and I am your relationship manager in this case. What I will do is I will coordinate with planning to help develop the plan and bring in the resident experts to go as deep as possible. We're going to look at your tax returns and we're going to ferret out anything that we possibly can that we can use to either mitigate taxes or be opportunistic from an asset transfer standpoint, whatever comes up, estate planning standpoint. And then I'm going to meet with them and toss these ideas around, and we're going to come up with the best possible options and then go back to you. And the relationship manager, or in this case, I'm your advisor, I'm going to have that conversation with you. I can bring them into the meeting if I so choose. I don't need to. For the more complex cases, we absolutely do. Same with portfolio management. Once we have built your plan, then it's time to allocate the portfolios. So I will consult with portfolio management to make sure that we get the best possible structure, risk reward in your portfolio based on the output that we've gotten from the planning process. So everything's integrated and coordinated. And by not having these experts be responsible for clients and say, oh, I have to call X, Y, and Z people today, so I'm not going to have time to focus on my craft. We allow them to go deeper. We allow them to continue to learn on a daily basis, and it works really well. It's very scalable as well. So case style approach, if you think about it that way.
I love it. And you know what's interesting is that we see this in other businesses, right? So to your point, you said it's fairly unique to our business and specifically to a firm of your size. but it's not unique to business, the way that you decided to handle things, right? If you went to a design build shop for websites, if you wanted somebody to go build your website for you, right? And it's going to be fairly complex. They'll have somebody there who's the graphic designer who will do like kind of the visual elements of it. They will have somebody who's the back end coder, and they'll usually have somebody who's a front end coder. And then they might actually have somebody on the team who's their whole job is writing content. And they might have another creative who does video and audio work or what have you. There's not this expectation. And I think maybe the industry I think it's just because of the way the industry evolved. There's this misconception that your advisor, he or she, is going to be the expert, the one and only person who has all the answers for you, right?
For everything.
Yeah. And that's not true in the world, frankly. And why would it necessarily be that way? And it goes back to the roots, right? Of originally they were called stockbrokers, and they were basically selling you something, right? I got some stuff to sell you, and I am sophisticated enough to be able to explain why you should buy this stuff, this packaged financial product. And awesome. But now that it's more of an advisory and more comprehensive, holistic approach to your client's wealth and their financial well-being, you're going to have to get a little broader on the skill set, and you might need other members on the team. I love it.
And that's how you compete in today's world with the disruption that's happening, is you deepen the level of service and also the expertise that you're able to offer to the clients.
Yeah.
So if you can offer more, if you can go deeper and uncover things in our clients' personal financial situations and really help guide them to make the best possible decisions, then you're not going to be disrupted. Because one, the relationship's really important. And our industry is interesting because we've met with prospective clients who maybe are considering a move, but they've had an advisor that they've trusted for 20, 25 years. And that trust is really like the foundation of everything. Whether they're getting, good results or not, sometimes that seems to be a secondary concern. That sort of baffled me out of the gate. It really did.
Yeah.
Because we could look at the portfolios and say, what is happening here? This doesn't really make sense. But they put their faith in the individual. So one, that tells us that relationships are critical. They're really important. But if you can have the relationship and then create a ton of value, then it's a huge win.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we aspire to do, is bring as much value as we can to the table every single day, make sure our clients are happy, and have an open line of communication where nothing's too big or small to ask. There's no ask that's too big or too small.
I love it. Now, one of the things you mentioned is that the business has grown incredibly rapidly over the last few years, right? Since you made this change of going, creating your own RIA structure and so forth. I think you mentioned, and please correct me if I'm misquoting you, I thought you said it's grown by 50% and over 3 years. That's a big growth number. So I always wonder, every time I hear that, especially when we're in a bull market, I'm like, oh, I wonder how much of that was, the market conditions. And I wonder how much of that was like, hey, we're bringing on new clients, new assets. And you mentioned you had a new affiliate advisor coming in. So that's 150 million AUM coming in there. How has that growth process happened while you're focusing on transitioning the business, right? Because that's a lot to do. I mean, obviously you're divvying up some of the elements there, but how do you accomplish that? Because it's pretty impressive.
It's interesting. So there's two elements to growth. One, organic, which is the best type of growth. Client referrals are number one for us, because if, Mike, we've been working with you for 10, 15 years and you're really happy and we're doing a great job for you, and you refer somebody to us, maybe a close relative or a friend or a business partner, whatever it may be, immediately out of the gate, there's a fundamental level of trust that's just there, because they really like you, Mike, and they trust your judgment, and they've made the referral. And thus, that is the best type of organic growth that we can possibly have.
Right.
So that never really stopped when we were going through the transition. We didn't take on any type of inorganic M&A type of assets. This affiliation is an example of an inorganic asset acquisition or transition. but organic, those are the two main lines of growth in our industry. So organic, which is bringing in net new clients, and inorganic, which is either you acquire, buy a firm, or you transition the firm's assets to your RIA. So yes, we've grown. That number's fairly accurate since we set up the RIA. Part of that is the asset transition, which was fairly significant. And we always shoot for single-digit growth, high-quality growth. And we sit in a position. So we're not shooting for the moon. We're not trying to grow at double digits,
right?
Because we feel that single-digit growth is really manageable. And we control that by being really selective in the new client relationships that we take on. So do our values and philosophies align? That's the most important thing that we can really get to know out of the gate. If they don't, then we're never going to have a productive working relationship. A wealth management relationship in its best form is collaborative. So it means that the client is willing and able to work with us to go through ideas and options. And when we need certain information, that we're able to receive that information. And then we go to work and do what we need to do. But there needs to be that open line of communication and transparency in order for it to be the most effective relationship possible, in order for us to deliver the maximum amount of value that we possibly can. And so in an initial client meeting, we will always say, is there value on both ends of the spectrum? So we're charging, call it 1%. We don't charge our clients more than 1%. And that's sort of a hard line rule.
Mm-hmm.
Are we able to deliver value that exceeds our fee to that client? If we're not, then most likely we won't pursue the relationship.
Right.
So again, being selective and choosing the right clients is just as important as the clients finding us to be the right partner for them, the right advisor for them.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's, yeah, I think I think on the surface, a lot of people say that. A lot of advisors, talk about their commitment to the client and so forth. But it from what we've talked about here and in our previous conversation, it's clear that you've actually gone through to make sure that this is systematized, and then also in your company culture, right? Because it's not it's not just solo advisors doing their thing and so forth. You're like really trying to structure this thing for the long term and make sure that it's a stable and growing business that outlives the founders and outlives hopefully your generation into the next generation as well. Getting to the team, this we could probably close it out here because I know we're reaching the end of our time, but I'm really fascinated by this. I always like to look at the team page anytime you go to a company's website, like, oh, who's on the team? What does a team look like? And so number one, very diverse team, which is fantastic in terms of age, gender, and species, by the way. Shout out to Mr. Nils, your chief happiness officer. I love that as a parent of a dog. I love the fact
Get a lot of comments. Mr. Nils is very popular.
I'll bet. It's fantastic.
It's interesting because it softens the whole idea of being a financial firm.
Yeah.
Finance is scary sometimes.
Yeah.
So having Mr. Nils, he actually comes into client meetings.
That's great.
If clients enjoy having a dog around. Non-COVID times,
yeah,
he will participate.
That's
and
fantastic.
Be sort of emotional support.
That's great. It kind of lowers your anxiety. You know what's really funny? I'm glad you brought that up, by the way. And I always talk about, listen, the financial conversations that an advisor has with a client, many times that's the first time that person is opening up about that, because it's a very emotional. You have to have a fantastic bedside manner, because it is very much like going to the doctor for many people. We're taught in our culture, don't talk about money. You don't
right.
talk about how much money you have or how much money you feel like you should have or whatever. You just don't talk about that in polite company, especially in the.
I don't ask you how much you make, right? Yeah. As your friends.
Very.
How much did you make last year, Mike?
Yeah, exactly. It's very awkward, isn't it? Yeah, you don't ask people how much they make. You definitely don't ask them how much they have, right? It's very just considered.
Or how about this one? Did you save more than you earned last year?
Right. Yeah. That's an uncomfortable question for people.
Could you really afford that car you're driving? Yeah.
It's so true, right? So, and we also have and if people are wealthy and you're serving, high net worth clients, our our culture is teaching them that they should feel some level of shame for how much money they have. In many ways, they're hearing that all the time, is that you're rich and I'm not doing so well. And it's because you're rich that I'm not doing so well. And many people hear that. And so they're like, listen, I'm just going to keep this close to the vest. And again, it's particularly true up in New England, where it's a much more kind of culturally conservative in that respect, close to the vest. So I wanted to dive into the team a little bit, mainly from your leadership style perspective, because anybody who's accomplished what you've accomplished, and, congratulations to what you've done. And I'm sure there's gonna be a lot more success in the future, but you have to have some leadership principles that you follow that allow you to get people to buy in, to see you as the leader. And you're a young dude, right? And coming into a business that was established with some folks that were more senior. What are some of those leadership principles that you follow that you think maybe other team leaders can learn from?
So this is a really interesting question, and there's probably a lot to unpack, more than we have time for today. But the way, and so I'm going to just make a reference to my brother Lucas, who's been tremendous in this regard, in really designing a plan for hiring and managing our talent. And that's really important, to just have a plan, have some direction. When do you hire? How do you hire? And what are your expectations? Do they have roles and responsibilities? And actually, our now Chief Technology Officer had recruiting experience way back when in his career, really successful in the recruiting industry. And he helped us build some principles around how do we evaluate performance. So one, in order to evaluate performance, you have to have certain job duties. And so you need to define what those are. And then give people ownership. That's the guiding principle. We will look at the business and what is needed from a sort of roles and responsibilities standpoint, define those, and then hire into that role, train somebody for that role if they need to be trained, and then give them ownership over running their day. So we're not about micromanaging at all. And I think that has really created a culture where we're independent thinkers and we can really grow our respective departments. Because once you give somebody that control and you give them that autonomy, they can do amazing things. And they're not sort of bound to a really, really inflexible structure of pushing widgets around and processing things. So that's been huge for us, is finding the right people that have the entrepreneurial spirit to think about how do we do things better. So number one in our culture is always question how we do things. The last thing we want to hear is that's how I've always done it. We hear that a lot, right? In our industry.
A lot in this industry.
And I'll make a reference to technology quickly, is, we installed a reporting system that is a heavy six figures per year. And that's not something that we take lightly. And I've seen many advisors implement a performance reporting system that they want to look very similar to the old system that they had to be able to deliver the same output. So why would you spend so much money unless you're getting more value out of a new system, right? And so it's challenging that whole principle of this is how we used to do things. So we're always looking to be more efficient in our day-to-day, and we focus on internal operations first and foremost. So if we can be as efficient as possible internally, the departments can challenge certain things about the way things are done and improve processes, then we can give everybody more time and we can focus on really high value activities to move the business forward. And so the infrastructure that we have today is a direct result of this culture of giving people direction, allowing them ownership over their roles, and really to grow within those roles, and bring solutions and options to the table that we can quickly adopt and integrate and implement as a small firm, which at a larger firm, maybe it's more bureaucratic and it takes months, years to get something implemented. We can act quickly. So we focus on ideas. We focus on changing the norm. some of our core values: be the solution, be a team player, be uncomplicated, be yourself, be present, and be open to change. Those are the core values that really guide our team. We want to minimize complexity. We want people to be themselves, and we do a lot for our team. We have weekly breathing sessions. We used to have a massage therapist.
Hold on a second. What is a weekly breathing session? Tell me about that. I want to hear this. What is this?
Yeah, so we have a breathing coach that does 30 minutes once a week with the team. They can opt in, opt out if they want. And it's meant to reset the system, allow people to be relaxed, blow off some steam.
Okay, yeah.
And so we had a massage therapist that was coming in once a week, and people could sign up and they could get massages. Again, for a company our size, like, that doesn't really exist. Our benefits packages are really strong. We spent a lot of money there. Help to fund people's HSAs.
Mm-hmm.
We pay for a significant portion of their health care. We have a nice matching program from a 401k standpoint, and they have flexible schedules. So we don't have a designated number of vacation days or
mm-hmm.
days off, if you will, paid days off. So we allow people to sort of come and go. And what we found is that that's how they're able to do their best work, if they can manage their own day.
I love it. You know, it is really refreshing to hear that in the financial space, just because historically it hasn't been like that. But what people are seeing, the best talent sees what's available in other industries, right? Like the tech industry specifically. And so they know they have options, right? It's like, I don't have to just work in the wealth management space. I can go over here and work at this new hot tech company or this new design agency or whatever. And here's the things that are available. And many of those are what you're describing, right? And here's the leadership principles they have and the empowerment they have. And so I love the fact that you're building a company in that fashion, because we've been talking a lot about it. We've mentioned it on this show, that there is a war for talent. Even though you're seeing, some of the economic jobs outlook doesn't look great as a result of COVID, the reality is high quality people will always have options, and there will always be a challenge to attract and retain the best people. And so it sounds like you've made a commitment to, hey, we're going to invest in these people. We're going to treat them right and give them the empowerment to change the world. It's great.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, is we care. We're like a big, small family.
Yeah. Big, small family. I love it.
We care about all of our people, and we know them really well, and they know each other really well, which is awesome. And it's a beautiful thing. And the working culture in the office is great. And we had that rapport,
and
trust, and that collaboration going into the pandemic. And we're able to seamlessly operate like this. We miss being together, obviously. That's the downside. But we're very fortunate to be in an industry where we actually got busier as the pandemic hit, because we engaged with our clients more often than we usually do, to sort of give them the confidence and being able to navigate through this difficult time.
That's great.
And that comes back to the team. And if they weren't happy, if they didn't feel supported, if they didn't have direction, then they wouldn't be able to really exceed expectations. So I think we've done a good job there. The thing that always keeps me up at night is, how do we keep this going?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're 3-4 years in with some of these people. And so where do you go from here? Right.
Yeah.
That's always the challenge.
Yeah.
Our team generally wants to be challenged. They want to grow. And so we constantly have to be looking for opportunities and educational experiences, advancement, new things like transitioning this business. That's something new that the whole team pretty much got to get involved with and make a contribution. So at the end of the day, caring about your people and spending a lot of time with them. Where Lucas and I sit, the biggest challenge that we have now is we do reviews quarterly, sit down and check in with every single person. And so if we have another 5 or 6 people, that will get really time consuming. It already is for us.
Yeah.
But I think that's critical, because we can say, hey, Mike, here's what we had laid out for the quarter. Give us an update. How did we do? How do you think you did from your perspective? And we can level set, and then we can plan for the next quarter. And so we're always on the same page.
Yeah.
And so it's very proactive.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's a great way to leave things off. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with me and tinkering through some of the early technical difficulties we had getting started. Max, I'm sure many people are going to be inspired and want to follow up with you based on this show. What's the best way for them to reach out to you and connect?
Email. It's max.winthrop@winthropwealth.com.
Really easy.
LinkedIn, also a good way. I don't really respond to the LinkedIn messages, but connect on LinkedIn and we can go from there.
Perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you give it a like and maybe, if you're feeling social, give it a share and leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Speaking of which, if you have questions or suggestions for a guest or a topic for the show, please make sure you reach out via podcast@truelytics.com or use the contact form on the Truelytics website. Lastly, before we go, huge thanks to Max Winthrop for joining me on the show today. So much good stuff. I'm really thrilled that Terry put us together. Okay, that's enough for me today. Please make sure you stay safe, wear your mask, and keep your distance. And lastly, of course, be nice to each other, okay? We will see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast. See ya. Bye.